is a Cablevision special edition presentation.
For the last 2 decades, the plight of the Baymen has been in the headlines and on the news. But the battles appear unending, and the stakes are getting higher. Pollution, including PCB contamination and brown tide, environmental degradation of habitats and overdevelopment, regulations that include a multitude of commercial fishing permits, a striped bass moratorium, and the banning of traditional hull seining. There are limitations on where, when, and how to catch fish.
The economic impact is going to be incredible. We stand to lose everything we have.
In the last 10 years, 75% of your full-time baymen had to leave working on the water. They had to leave what was their traditional way of life.
In 1985, a mysterious brown algae bloom devastated the East End's million-dollar scallop industry. Brown tide is an algae growth that blocks sunlight from the water, starving all life below. By the height of the algae bloom, 90% of the scallops were killed off in the Peconic Bay system. In 1986, after detecting unacceptable PCB levels, polychlorinated biphenyls, after years of General Electric dumping them in the Hudson River, New York State banned the sale of striped bass until 1990. This put the commercial fishermen out of business for 5 years. Striped bass accounted for 50% of their annual income.
And presto, within 1 year time, we had lost the bay scallop, which was our chief shellfish, and the striped bass, the single most important of the fin fish.
It's an anadromous fish that travels from saltwater to freshwater to spawn. Striped bass migrate along the Atlantic coast in the spring and fall. It's a challenging fish to catch, a trophy fish, and a delicious fish to eat, getting a good price on the market. The fish of choice for both baymen and anglers. There have been decades of bad blood between recreational fishermen and commercial fishermen over the issues of availability and abundance of this one species, striped bass.
Finally, the fish managers were saying, look, we got to cut back on some, of these species. We have to reduce the pressure on some of these species. So the agenda of the sports fishing lobby became, let's take the catch away from the commercial fishermen so we, the sports fishermen, can go on growing.
They can bring in a lot of big graphs and statistics, pretending at least to show that they bring much more income into the community. Gas stations, restaurants, tackle shops, all these things theoretically profit more from the sportsmen because there's so many more of them, and they have more votes, and they have better connections in Albany. They have every advantage, which makes it all the more unsporting, what they're doing.
It's greed. It's greed. I'm going to tell you, and I, I'm not this kind of person. But some of these recreational fishermen, and I'm not saying all of them, because you can go down there and talk to 2 of them, and they say, Jesus, let these guys go fishing, and you go talk to the next one, he'd say, they're no good, SOBs, they're the rottenest, they're the scourge of the earth, these guys, these hull seiners, they want to see us gone.
Since the mysterious decline of striped bass coast-wide in 1982, it has become the most highly regulated and controversial species on the East Coast. In 1984, Congress passed a law, the Atlantic Striped Bass Conservation Act, that placed the management of all stripers on the East Coast with an interstate authority, the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. Under strict quotas, the commercial fishermen on Long Island were cut back 80% on their historic catch.
We had to curtail the harvest because the fish were not reproducing effectively, regardless of what the reason was.
State policy says that we recognize the recreational and commercial use of all species were appropriate. But the primary goal is to maintain those stocks. So if we have to restrict human use of a stock to preserve it, we will.
Despite the restrictions on striped bass, in 1992, New York State's 1.5 million recreational fishermen have harvested 837,000 pounds of striped bass, as compared to 226,000 pounds of bass for the baymen.
3 years later, we're still under the same breakdown. 90%, better than 90% goes to the sports fishermen and 10% to the, the commercial fishermen. Now, it doesn't have to be that way.
In 1993, the commercial net fishermen's quota for striped bass is 134,684 pounds. significantly under previous years. Commercial fishermen are required to purchase a special license and tags that are required for striped bass. This year, each fisherman will receive 47 tags for the season, open July 1st to December 15th. This equals 1 fish per man every 5 days. The recreational fishing season for striped bass is open from May 8th to December 15th, almost 2 months more than the commercial season. There is no harvest quota. They're allowed 1 fish per day per man that's at least 36 inches. There is no license and no fees.
We put a quota in on the commercial fishermen because we had landings data. That has not grown with the population. That's a problem, and we're attempting through the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission to correct that, to look at how we can allow that side of the equation to grow, or to be more restrictive on the recreational side. So we are aware of that problem.
I think we are aware of the fact that the recreational catches of striped bass over the last couple of years have climbed far more rapidly than commercial catches, and that we need to look hard at that to see whether it represents something that's unfair.
These guys have really been forced out of business, not because the fish aren't there, the fish are there. A lot of them, too.
There's no longer any reason for strict, absurdly strict regulation of the striped bass fishery. We now have a recovered, thriving stock in the Chesapeake as well as in the Hudson River, and those are signs that could mean significant quota, a meaningful financial quota.
Defining recovery is not something that's been thought out enough. We've asked the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission to do that, to define what recovery is and how that affects the regulation.
We are now in the process of attaining that balance where we want to be, which is prior to 1973 biologically. So we're close.
How long? How close?
2-3 years, probably.
I believe, and the department believes, that there is a place for commercial fishermen in the future of Long Island, that this is a 300-year tradition, and we do not want to see that tradition go away. But we have to manage that place in a way that will respect what were very badly damaged fishery stocks and restore that place in a careful and methodical way. And we think that's what we're doing. We are seeing a return of the striped bass. It's good for the commercial fishermen, it's good for the recreational fishermen, it's good for Long Island. And I hope in future years that we will be able to again expand the quota.
Another looming threat to the Baymen. In 1993, 2 bills were introduced in Albany to designate the striped bass a game fish, prohibiting its commercial sale in New York State. This bill came with the heavy support of the recreational fishing lobby. It would put the commercial fishermen out of the striped bass business and take wild striped bass from the consumer.
It's very frustrating to think that there's a group that wants to really, take striped bass away from the consumer and from the people of the state of New York and make it a game fish, and it means they're going to have the enjoyment of catching it and no one else is going to enjoy it. If they really were as endangered as they say they are, then I could maybe cease doing something. And it's very frustrating to me to look at the numbers of their catch opposed to our catch. And they're getting like 80 to 90% of the fish that are caught are being caught by them, the hook and line fishermen, of the total waste of New York State. And they're pointing the finger at us, at the one that's, devastating the striped bass population. And they should be looking in the mirror instead of pointing the finger at us. And I'm hoping maybe someday some legislators will wake up and realize and look at the numbers and not just the numbers in the voting booth. I hope those guys will eventually come around and realize that we're just people who want to go be able to make a living for our family. We'll see. We're not done yet. There's a lot of fight left in us yet, so.
Practiced since biblical times and brought to America by the first settlers. Halseining is a unique form of commercial fishing where they launch a dory, a boat, from the shore into the surf. The boat makes a wide semicircle through the ocean while a dory man sets a net behind them. When they get to shore, they haul in the net by winches on 2 trucks, which pulls in the net and bunt with fish onto the beach. On July 28, 1992, a civil disobedience protest was held at Indian Wells Beach in Amagansett. The protest was staged to oppose the state's 1990 banning of haul seining for striped bass. 20 people were arrested. The most notable was Baymen's advocate and musician, Billy Joel.
Well, no one wants to break the law, but it's a bad law, and it's a law that has no justification. There's no data to support why these people shouldn't be able to fish in their traditional manner.
There's no evidence that there's an unacceptable kill rate of undersized or out-of-season striped bass in the haul seine. There is no evidence.
There is no direct study that shows what the hook and or what the bycatch loss is from a haul seine study. The potential exists.
Bycatch is the unwanted fish kill that occurs in all types of fishing techniques.
You might catch nothing but fish in the slot size limit. Would be no problem. But also you could catch fish that are outside of it, too large. Now you have to get them back into the surf alive, or too small, which is the primary concern. We are having discussions with them. We're looking at ways that the gear could possibly be used again. And those negotiations are still going on, talking with fishermen about that. How can we work with the gear that we allay all concerns about bycatch mortality?
It is a possibility or feasibility that haul seining could come back for striped bass. If things are modified.
Yes.
It's in the realm of possibilities.
It is within the realm of possibilities.
Once a familiar part of the South Fork landscape, ocean haul seining has all but vanished. Only one crew, Jens Lester's, can legally haul seine now for the state survey on striped bass. Stripers can only be caught by gill net, pound traps, or hook and line. Commercial fishermen are prohibited from keeping any illegal-sized striped bass, even if they die in their nets. They must be thrown away for trash.
So they call it the dirty fishery. Now, the truth is that for the last 8 years, the Department of Environmental Conservation has hired a haul seine crew to go to the ocean and catch striped bass with a haul seine.
The purpose of this study is to look at biological information regarding the striped bass, and we just happen to have chosen this piece of gear, the ocean haul seine, as our gear of choice.
For the last 7 years, Vic Vecchio has been the project biologist on a survey conducted by the New York State DEC. This study examines biological characteristics of the adult striped bass stock caught in the fall with a haul seine off eastern Long Island. The data collected is used for the Coastal Management Plan of striped bass. The DEC hires local haul seiners to do the survey. The crew includes Captain Jens, his father Francis, Jen's son Mitchell, Wally Bennett, and William Cromer. The haul seine crew is paid to haul for the DEC, but they are not allowed to keep any of the striped bass. The only fish they can keep is the bycatch, or unwanted fish in the net. The money fish, the striped bass, is thrown back into the ocean.
Never do this. Another $20, throw it away. Yeah. All seining you can see. You can throw the good ones away, keep what you want, and they all live. But you can't do it this way. Throw perfectly good fish away.
So you saw we released 2/3 of the catch immediately, and now we've kept a subsample for age and size distribution, and we're going to release them. Let's go, man. We take the fish that we have and we put them in this tank and we fill it with running seawater. Well, now we measure the fork length, which is the length between the forks, 700, 757, and the total length. We take a few scales off to determine the age of the fish. We look at the scales, it's like reading rings on a tree, and then we weigh it. Now we're going to place an internal anchor tag in this fish provided to us by the Fish and Wildlife Service. You make a slight incision into the side of the fish, and like putting a button in a buttonhole, you insert the button in and then pull the streamer so that the button stays inside and the streamer is on the outside of the fish. Then we just put it back.
Well, there's not much else to do, you know, to make any decent money besides the bass. And you can see by all the bass we're catching that there's plenty of bass around. There's enough for everybody, you know, enough for us, enough for the sporties, whoever wants to go fishing. It's just ridiculous that they're stopping us.
Might have bothered us. I think you had to throw them things back, you know, after you caught them. But after a while, you just get used to it.
I'd rather put them in a truck, take them home. Maybe someday.
It's a shame.
Well, every day is a surprise. You don't know from one day to the next what you're going to catch. What we call what Mother Nature's going to let us have. What's Mother Nature going to give us today? You know, because you never know. That's probably one of the reasons why a lot of us do it.
A third-generation fisherman, Stuart Vorpal is considered a new kid on the block in the fishing community. A native of Amagansett, Stuart has haul-seined and trapped for fish since the 50s. He's been an East Hampton town trustee and is an outspoken defender of the Baymen.
All the normal, shall we say, entitlements that normal society has in their job description or whatever they have, you know, we don't have none of that. We have zero. The only thing we have is tomorrow to go fishing. All of us, our careers is very simple. We provide food for people. It's a shameful mark of an affluent society. They consider those of us who decide to use our hands to provide food for people as, God, social outcasts. They're allowing us to catch less than 1 striped bass per day, and they call that commercial fishing season. They have this false idea that by doing this, it will create perpetual abundance of fish in the sea. And this is a condition that's never happened since the oceans themselves were created. It has never occurred. It's always in the cycle. For me personally, the past 2 fishing seasons have been what I call brokers. Literally gone broke, not because I haven't been catching fish, but because I've been plagued, for some reason, catching striped bass. Because literally lots of times when we go to speak on matters at public hearings, our words don't count at all to the politicians because we don't have an armload of degrees. You know, we can't list off Harvard and Yale and University of Maryland and this and that and that. We ain't got all that, see. But we got this, see. And there's more right here than it is in everything along the length of them people's arms, see. But still, well, no, it don't count. There is no way we can obey these laws anymore. No way. No sense to it. Mother Nature can wreck us, and we recover. But with man and government, oh my God, we can't survive what they do. My fingernails are pretty narrow because I chew them a lot, but they're going to get chewed a whole lot more before I quit.
It's like therapy to go haul seining anyway, you know. It just brings back a lot of old memories, a lot of fun to get down here. I miss it a lot. I'd like to be here, you know, but it's kind of bittersweet in a way, you know. I'd rather be here making a living than watching somebody else do a study, and the people that are doing the study are the people that put you out of business, you know. The fish that they allow us to catch, There isn't any reason why we can't catch them with a whole seine. They don't have any, they don't have any justification or anything to prove that they're saying it's a dirty fishery and the mortality rate is too high. They don't have any justification to say the stock's depleted right now. They'll all tell you that there's a lot of striped bass. Anybody you talk to will tell you there's tons of them. They're all over the place. If they would have caught them in a gill net, or if they would have caught them in a pound trap, or if they'd have caught them on hook and line, those are the methods that you're allowed to use to catch them, but you're not allowed to use the traditional method of haul seining. Why is it okay for them to use a haul seine to do their study, but it's not okay for us to use a haul seine to make a few bucks? Or, to catch the measly 40-some fish that they give us anyway. And look at what these guys are taking home, 3 totes of trash for their lobster pots. They can't even take enough fish home to make a day's pay. Let alone there wasn't any in there other than the bass, I mean, the bass was the money fish, and that's what they're taking home. It's a way of life. It's a tradition. It's one more thing that this country or this part of Long Island was famous for, and they've taken it away. Nobody will ever see it unless you go to the museum, or you watch your film. It'll be gone. It's an art that'll be lost forever. There are only 2 or 3 other places in the entire world that they do this. It's just a lost way of life, and a lot of lost history, and a lot of unhappy families, and a lot of men who have been stripped of their livelihood.
But we love it so much, We love to catch fish, love to fish. Now I'm forced to make a living. That's something I don't like to do. So how can you enjoy getting up and going to work in the morning? You don't want to do that. I don't want to pound nails for a living. So everybody thought, oh, you guys are fishermen. You guys go out every day and catch fish. Well, we don't. There's been weeks and months went by where there was no fish at all. It's not because there wasn't any. It's just they weren't in here. So it's not that easy. And we have to wait. We have to, whenever we make our money, we have to be very gingerly on how we spend it, because it could take 2 months before we make any more, There's another thing, a big thing that happened, is when you catch a lot of fish, New York Fulton Fish Market knows about it, and they drop the price right down. And we didn't have any benefits. We don't have no retirement. We got nothing. We're gonna stay down here, we thought, and fish till we died. But that, so when we got put out, we couldn't go on unemployment. We couldn't, collect on nothing. We were just out altogether, so. My father, when they fished, now that's all they ever did. They don't have any other means of income or work. They don't know how to do carpentry. They don't know how to do plumbing or other things like that. What are they supposed to do, I'm banging nails and stuff and doing whatever I have to. Odd jobs of welding, and I just make it from month to month. Just make it. Sometimes the bank calls up for the mortgage payment,
For me, it's hard to argue with what was done because it worked, because the fish is recovering, and because it looks like we can have both a recreational and a commercial harvest now. Maybe it would have done it on its own. It's too big a gamble.
If anything, this is a success story, not a bad story, not a, look at what they did, they being the government or they being the regulation people. This is a success story, big time.
Pretty soon there's going to be nothing else to turn to on the water, like, other things that we do. Just, him and I, all our families, all they were fishermen, now we're just cut out of it altogether. And when you're raised in it, when you start that young, it just gets in your blood, and it's hard to get out.
If you lose haul seining, that's a whole way of life, and we've been here for hundreds of years, and then it's gone. Once you lose it for a while, nobody will know how to do it, so even if they let it come back, you wouldn't be able to do it because nobody know how.
Well, how do you feel about having to do this for the DEC?
Not very good. Don't like it at all. But it seems like our last resort. Maybe something will come out of it on our positive side, instead of maybe. If they say it's a dirty fishery, right? What's so dirty about it? You see all these fish going back. Look, every one of them alive. We've done this. We made what? How many sets in the last 3 years? We do 60 sets a year. We've done it for 4 years and hasn't been one dead fish yet. If we were, you know, only able to keep a certain size, they want to restrict us just to keep so many. We could do that and no problem at all. And, you know, we wouldn't hurt nothing. It's just ridiculous. This here is our bycatch. This is what we're allowed to catch. And without the bass, this is all we deal with. This is a weak fish, sea trout. That's also called a sea trout. This is a bluefish. This is a Spanish mackerel. Little spots on them. These are real good eating fish. And porgy. We might have maybe $40 or $50 worth of fish here, and with that, what do we got? We might be able to pay for the fuel that got us up here. You know, if we had the bass, on the other hand, there's about maybe it wasn't such a great haul, but we had 200-300 pounds of bass. Maybe you get $2, $2-3 a pound. And, you know, after a while, we do that 3 or 4 times a day. We can scrape out a good day's pay.
Obviously, there's a lot of striped bass. I mean, you're seeing a lot of striped bass. So what are they looking for?
That's a good question. We really don't know. The only thing we've heard is negative so far about the wanting to make a game fish, which is totally ridiculous, you know. We should be able to sell the fish and make a living. You know, we're feeding other people. I mean, what bad is that, you know? I guess it's wrong.
I'll tell you, I could sell all the striped bass I wanted tomorrow morning. You know, I ain't gonna lie to anybody. I'm gonna tell them the truth. I could, one telephone call, I could have a truck out here to pick up striped bass tomorrow morning. So, you know, and I haven't done that yet. It's very frustrating when you know how many bass is around. Right now, they're backing us into the corner more and more. And I'm gonna have to do something. I gotta come up with some money somehow. In fact, I told her, she was working last night, I told her on the phone that somebody was looking for a truck driver, okay, a garbage truck driver, okay, and she, you know, had a fit.
Well, I mean, he's been fighting all this time because he's, you know, not that he prefers to do fishing, which he does, but I think it's more than that. I think Dan is a fisherman. It's part of who he is, and he's been fighting to preserve that way of life. And I know we need money, but to quit before it's over and take a job, I think there's something else out there. I don't know what it is, but
Complete change of lifestyle in 1985. Complete. I mean, can't even tell you the difference.
Now, what did 1985 represent? Was that with the whole bass?
That was the banning of the PCB thing in 1985. They were actually going to close it down in 1985, but we told them they didn't have enough data to close it, so we got the fall fishery opened that year under the tag system, the first year of the tags. They closed us down for about 4 years, 5 years. That's why I built the Kong pots and, you know, and started, you know, doing the Kong. Otherwise, I just stayed on the ocean and kept fishing. So.
What we do now is Dan is a part-time fisherman, you know, doing lobstering and doing clamming and then doing a little scalloping or just trying to make ends meet, kind of a fisherman, rather than haul seining, which was really his life. We're not really a Baymen's family now.
It was a free, carefree life, you know, your independent life, and the harder the work, the more money you made, and now they're regulating it. So, like I say, if I was going to go into the fishery now, I mean, what advantage you got?
You could go extinct much sooner than the striped bass or any marine species that you can think of. We, the traditional commercial fishermen, the Baymen of Long Island, may be extinct, you know, by the end of this decade.
I think this community is at very serious risk of losing its character.
Tomorrow night is part 3, the conclusion of the Baymen. we'll take a look at what the future holds for the Baymen and their families in their traditional way of life. Good night.